Ever since I was a kid, I've been what you could call outdoorsy. It was Labor Day weekend, 1985, and me and my friends Sarah, Mark, and Alex decided to embark on a camping trip deep in the heart of the dense woods of Blackwood National Park. There was an air of excitement regarding these woods. We'd all heard the rumors of it being haunted, and of how hikers had supposedly been snatched up by the legendary Wendigo. Of course, we didn't believe in such things, but nothing could have prepared us for what we would experience. The journey began with excitement and laughter as we set up our campsite near a tranquil stream. The air was filled with the sweet scent of pine, and the sky was a tapestry of stars. It was the perfect setting for a weekend of relaxation. As the fire crackled and we shared stories beneath the moon's gentle glow, we noticed something odd. Our shadows seemed to move independently. We dismissed it as a trick of the firelight and our tired minds messing with us. The night passed without incident, but as the next day wore on, we began to notice strange occurrences. Objects would shift in our peripheral vision, and faint whispers echoed through the woods. Sarah was the first to mention it, a nervous tremor in her voice. But we laughed it off as an overactive imagination. It wasn't until the second night that things took a sinister turn. I awoke to the sound of footsteps, faint and ghostly, circling our campsite. I nudged Mark awake, and we listened in silence as the footsteps continued, growing closer and closer. Suddenly, the fire went out, plunging us into darkness. Panic set in as we fumbled for our flashlights, illuminating the woods around us. That's when we saw shadows, not attached to anything, lurking in the trees. They moved with a malevolent purpose, their forms elongated and twisted. It was as though they had taken on a life of their own, free from all control. Fear clenched at my heart as I realized that our own shadows were hunting us down. We screamed for Sarah and Alex to wake up, but it was too late. The shadows descended upon us, their inky tendrils wrapping around our limbs like suffocating vipers. We fought back with desperation, trying to shake them off, but they were relentless. With a final desperate effort, we managed to break free, and the shadows retreated into the darkness. Gasping for breath, we stared at each other, our faces pale with terror. Our once innocent camping trip had turned into a nightmare beyond our wildest imagination. We decided to pack up and leave immediately, but as we hurriedly gathered our belongings, we heard whispers emanating from the darkness, their voices a chilling, mocking chorus. "You can't escape us," they taunted. "We are your darkest fears, your hidden regrets, your deepest secrets." We stumbled through the woods, our flashlights cutting through the oppressive darkness. The shadows pursued us relentlessly, always just out of reach. With each passing moment, our hope dwindled, and we could feel our sanity slipping away. As dawn broke, we found ourselves in a clearing surrounded by ancient, gnarled trees. The shadows closed in, their forms coalescing into a nightmarish entity that blocked our path. We were trapped, with no way out. We knew that we didn't have much time to make our way out of the woods. Sarah pulled out her compass, but the dial just spun in fast circles, never settling on true north. I tried my best not to panic. If we found our way back to the creek and followed it, we were sure to find our way out. We wandered for what seemed like hours. There was no way that we had gotten so far away since last night. It didn't make any sense. The woods looked completely unfamiliar to us, as if it was changing all around us. Our nerves were frayed, and we began to turn on one another. We threw blame at one another. Whose fault was it that we got lost? Whose idea was this camping trip in the first place? Our screaming match hit a fever pitch as we suddenly heard the sound of running water. The creek was right next to us, and I knew in my heart that it wasn't there a second ago. We were elated as we thought we'd finally found our way out. We followed the creek for hours, but it never led anywhere. Once again, night fell. In a desperate bid for survival, we huddled together and lit a makeshift torch. The flames flickered and danced, casting a defiant light against the encroaching darkness. With a chorus of screams and hisses, the shadows recoiled, unable to withstand the purity of the fire. We knew it was our only chance to escape, and we ran, guided by the feeble light of the torch. The shadows pursued us, their whispers growing louder and more insidious. But we refused to look back. Hours passed, and we finally reached the edge of the woods, the morning sun breaking through the trees. The shadows retreated into the depths of the forest, vanishing like a nightmare upon waking. When we left the woods, something was wrong. Our cars were nowhere to be found, and the ones that were there looked strange and foreign to us. Everything looked just sort of wrong. We made our way to the ranger's station, where we made a terrible discovery. After identifying ourselves, we were informed that we had been declared missing. We questioned how this could be, as we were only in the woods for 2 nights. That's when he told us that we had been gone for 12 years. The year was 1997, and we had long since been declared dead. How could this be possible? We did our best to piece together the remains of our shattered lives. There was no explanation for what happened to us, the things we experienced, or the way we had evidently traveled over a decade into the future. I do know one thing, though. I know that I'll never go back into those woods ever again.
If you enjoy our stories, please like, share, and subscribe so that we can continue to bring you new horror stories every week. Thank you for listening, and now for the next tale. I had always been obsessed with collecting rare and obscure films. My small apartment was filled with stacks of old VHS tapes, film reels, and movie posters that covered every inch of wall space. But it wasn't until I stumbled upon that mysterious, unmarked box of reels at an estate sale that my life took a chilling turn. The estate sale was held in an old mansion on the outskirts of town. As I browsed through the dusty rooms filled with antique furniture and forgotten relics, something drew me to a small, dimly lit corner of the basement. There, tucked away in the shadows, was a box of old film reels. The elderly woman running the sale seemed eager to get rid of them, mentioning that they had belonged to her late husband, a filmmaker who had passed away years ago. She explained that she had no interest in movies and was happy to part with them for a mere pittance. I couldn't believe my luck. The box was filled with dozens of film reels, each labeled with dates and titles I had never heard of. My heart raced with excitement as I handed over the money and left the estate sale with my newfound treasure. That night, I eagerly set up my old projector and began to examine the reels. Most of them were mundane home movies or amateur films, but one reel caught my attention. It was labeled simply as Untitled Horror Film. I threaded the reel onto the projector and watched as the flickering images came to life on the screen. The film quality was poor. It was harsh, black and white, extremely grainy, and the sound was distorted and washed out. It was hard to make out what was going on, but I found it fascinating. From what I could tell, the film told the story of a group of people who had ventured into an abandoned factory deep in the woods. As the story unfolded, I was drawn in as I tried to make sense of it all. The images were abstract and bizarre, but it was extremely unsettling. It was unlike any film I had ever seen, and I couldn't tear my eyes away from the screen. As the film reached its climax, the characters in the story faced a series of gruesome and increasingly graphic deaths. Each was depicted with a shocking level of detail and realism. It was a complete assault on the senses that made me feel physically ill. But it was the final scene that left me truly horrified. In it, the The last surviving character entered a room in the factory, only to come face to face with a mirror. As the character stared into the mirror, their reflection suddenly came to life, reaching out and pulling them into the glass. I turned off the projector, my heart pounding in my chest. The film had left me feeling profoundly disturbed and unsettled. I couldn't explain it, but it was as though the events on screen had somehow seeped into my own reality. That night, I had trouble sleeping. I kept seeing flashes of the film's images in my mind, the abandoned factory, the mirror, the gruesome deaths. It was as though the film had embedded itself in my subconscious, refusing to let go. Over the next few days, my health deteriorated. I was barely able to keep any food down, and I ran high fever. My girlfriend urged me to go to the hospital, but I told her that I was fine. It would pass in a few days. But things only got worse. Soon, I began to have strange visual and auditory hallucinations, and the visions from the film invaded my dreams, leaving my nights sleepless. But the most disturbing part was the mirror in my bathroom. Every time I looked into it, I could see movement behind me, as though something was lurking just beyond my field of vision. I would turn around, but there was nothing there. I became increasingly paranoid and started to lose touch with reality. No matter where I went, I could always sense that something was watching me. Sometime in the next few days, I found myself wandering the streets in a fever-induced daze. Eventually, I made my way to the woods on the outskirts of town. I was completely disoriented, having no idea where I was, when suddenly I came across an old, rundown factory. My stomach dropped as I realized it was exactly the same as the setting of the film. Something compelled me to explore the building, hoping that it may reveal the secret to releasing me from this waking nightmare. The factory was just as it had appeared in the film, decaying, foreboding, and filled with a palpable sense of dread. I explored its dark corridors, each step echoing with an eerie sense of déjà vu. It was as though I had been here before, as though I were reliving the events of the film in real life. I reached the room with the mirror, and there, just as in the movie, I saw my own reflection come to life, reaching out and pulling me into the glass. I screamed in terror as I was sucked into the mirror, the world around me fading away into darkness. And then, I found myself back in my apartment, trapped in a nightmarish loop. The events of the film in the factory continued to replay over and over, each time with subtle variations, each time with a new horror awaiting me. I realized then that I was trapped in the world of the film, a never-ending nightmare from which there was no escape. The film collector had become the unwilling protagonist in a twisted horror story, forever doomed to relive his own terrifying fate. As I write this, I can feel the darkness closing in around me, the echoes of the film's horrors replaying in my mind. I know that I am trapped, that there is no way out, and that I am destined to be a prisoner of the film's malevolent power for all eternity.
The typewriter appeared in my life on an otherwise unremarkable autumn day. It sat in the corner of an antique shop, covered in a thin layer of dust, seemingly forgotten and forsaken. Its sleek, ebony frame and ornate keys caught my attention, and I couldn't resist the impulse to bring it home. Little did I know, this typewriter would become the conduit to a nightmare from beyond the grave. The typewriter bore the name Eldritch in faded gold letters. It seemed to beckon to me as if it held secrets that only I could unlock. I had always been a writer, and the thought of using a piece of history as my creative vessel filled me with anticipation. After purchasing the Eldritch, I placed it on my desk and inspected it more closely. It was old, perhaps dating back to the early 20th century. Its keys clacked with a satisfying mechanical precision, like music to my ears. I inserted a blank sheet of paper and began to type. At first, the words flowed effortlessly, stories and characters emerging as if summoned by a higher power. I found myself writing for hours, oblivious to the passage of time. The typewriter had a peculiar allure, an almost hypnotic quality that kept me chained to its keys. It was during one of those late-night writing sessions that things took a sinister turn. As I typed, I noticed the words on the page changing. Sentences twisted into unsettling messages, chilling phrases that seemed to defy explanation. I rubbed my eyes, thinking it was fatigue playing tricks on me. But when I refocused, the eerie words remained. "Join us in the abyss," the typewriter wrote, its letters sharp and jagged. A cold shiver raced down my spine. I didn't recall writing anything like that. The room seemed to grow darker, and the air became heavy with an unspoken presence. My heart raced as I stared at the typewriter, its keys now still. Nervously, I continued to type, hoping to dismiss the eerie message as a bizarre coincidence. But with every sentence, the messages grew darker and more foreboding. "Eternal torment awaits," it declared, and I knew this was not my writing. The following night, I couldn't resist the pull of the Eldritch typewriter, and I returned to my desk. As my fingers danced on the keys, the typewriter's ominous messages continued. "The dead whisper through me," it wrote. It was as if the machine itself was trying to convey messages from a realm beyond. Terrified and intrigued in equal measure, I decided to investigate the typewriter's history. I discovered that it had previously belonged to a renowned author, Evelyn Hartman, who had mysteriously disappeared in the 1940s. Legend had it that she had delved into the occult to find inspiration, ultimately vanishing without a trace. The typewriter, it seemed, was connected to her unsolved disappearance. I couldn't help but wonder if the words it now produced were somehow linked to Evelyn's fate. Had the typewriter captured her spirit, channeling her thoughts from the beyond? As I delved deeper into the history of Evelyn Hartman, my obsession with the typewriter grew. It seemed to whisper secrets and revelations that begged to be uncovered. Night after night, I typed, allowing the haunted machine to channel whatever it desired. "The abyss calls to you," it wrote one evening, and I couldn't resist. I typed back, asking, "What do you want from me?" The typewriter clattered to life. "Release me." That night, I embarked on a journey that would change my life forever. I researched ancient rituals and occult practices, desperate to uncover a way to free Evelyn's spirit from the typewriter's grasp. The typewriter seemed to guide me, offering cryptic instructions and esoteric knowledge that I couldn't possibly have known. With trembling hands, I performed the ritual, an intricate process involving candles, incantations, and offerings. As the final words were spoken, the room plunged into darkness, and the air grew thick with an otherworldly presence. Suddenly, I felt a chilling breeze, and the typewriter came to life, its keys typing with an otherworldly speed. "Thank you," it wrote. "Farewell." The room returned to normal, and the typewriter was silent once more. I realized that Evelyn's spirit had been released, and her presence had faded from the typewriter. I was left alone, exhausted and shaken. In the days that followed, I put the Eldritch typewriter away, unwilling to use it again. The messages from beyond the grave had taken their toll on my sanity. I tried to return to a normal life, but the typewriter haunted my thoughts. As time passed, I couldn't resist the temptation to revisit the machine that had changed my life. I dusted it off and typed a simple message, hoping for any sign of Evelyn's presence. The typewriter responded with a single word: rest. The weight of her plea was evident. She had found her release, and I had to find mine. I knew that I could never truly leave the haunting experiences behind, but it was time to move on. I placed the Eldritch typewriter back in the antique shop, hoping that someone else might discover its chilling secrets. Now, as I write this, I can't help but wonder if the eldritch typewriter found a new owner, luring them into a world of unexplainable horrors and ancient mysteries. The spirits of the past, it seemed, were never truly at rest, and I had merely scratched the surface of the otherworldly forces that had entangled themselves with the haunting machine.